My mom forgot to set a place for me at Thanksgiving. Said there weren't enough chairs, but my cousins plus one got a seat. I didn't argue. I just picked up the pie I brought and walked out. Then I canceled every streaming service and did what made them scream when they found out the next morning. My mother has a way of making everything about her. If she's hosting, you better believe the entire day will revolve around her comfort, her preferences, her image. I used to excuse it, telling myself she didn't mean to be selfish, that she just had a lot on her plate. But after years of watching her bend over backwards for certain people and barely glance at me, I realized it wasn't accidental. It was selective. She chooses who gets her attention, her energy, her care, and I've never been one of those people. I still showed up every holiday, though. I brought food, helped clean up, chipped in for decorations she couldn't afford, and never once showed up empty-handed. This year was no different. I walked in carrying a pecan pie I baked that morning, already planning to help with the dishes before leaving. The dining room was set up like a magazine spread. The mismatched crystal glasses she brags about, the special plates she only uses twice a year, the linen napkins she makes me iron. There were name cards at every single place setting. Every single place except mine. I asked where I was supposed to sit. She didn't even pause while basting the turkey, just said there weren't enough chairs this year, like that was the end of it. It might have been believable if I hadn't just counted 11 seats. Exactly the same number as last year. Except now one of those seats was taken by my cousin's brand new girlfriend, someone none of us had met before today. She was sitting there chatting like she'd been part of the family forever. It hit me in that moment. My own mother had made a choice. Given the option between me and a stranger, she picked the stranger. I glanced around the room, half expecting someone to notice, to say something. No one did. My dad was too busy carving ham. My younger sister was scrolling on her phone, probably waiting for someone to post a picture of her perfect Thanksgiving outfit. My cousin was pouring his girlfriend wine like she was royalty. I stood there with the pie in my hands, feeling like an intruder in my own family's house. There wasn't a scene. I didn't argue or demand a spot. I didn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me upset. I just walked over to the table, picked up the pie, and headed for the door. Not one person stopped me. When I closed that door behind me, it wasn't just about leaving Thanksgiving early. It was about finally understanding exactly where I stood in this family and what I was about to do next. I woke up the next morning with that same heavy knot in my chest. It wasn't sadness, not exactly, more like a sharp, steady reminder that I'd been foolish for so long. I kept telling myself my mom wasn't intentionally selfish, that she just didn't notice how she treated me differently. But now I knew better. She noticed. She chose. And I decided I was done paying for the privilege of being invisible. I made coffee, sat down at my laptop, and started with the biggest cut, the mortgage payment. For years, I'd been quietly covering it every month. Mom would call about how the bank was being difficult or how they'd just come up short again. She always made it sound like the roof over their heads depended on me. I believed her. Not anymore. I canceled that payment first. Then I went down the list of every little luxury they never acknowledged I paid for. Netflix, Hulu, Disney Plus, HBO, Spotify, all gone. Not paused, not downgraded, deleted. It wasn't an impulsive move. I sat there and thought about the way I'd stood in that dining room holding my pie while a stranger filled my seat, about how nobody said anything, about how this wasn't a one-off moment. It was just the latest in a lifetime of moments where I came last. By the time I was done, I felt calmer than I had in years. I wasn't lashing out. I was correcting a mistake I'd been making for far too long. It didn't take long for the fallout to start. My sister texted first asking why Netflix wasn't working. A few minutes later, my dad called saying Mom couldn't get her show to play. He wanted to know if I'd accidentally changed something. I told him it wasn't an accident. I'd canceled everything. And while we were on the subject, I wouldn't be paying the mortgage anymore either. I could have just stopped quietly, let them figure it out on their own. But I didn't want them thinking it was some oversight. I wanted them to know this was deliberate, that it came directly from me. He went quiet for a while before asking why. I didn't give a long explanation. I just said last night had made it clear exactly where I stood in this family, and I wasn't going to keep spending my money to stay in that position. By lunchtime, the messages were rolling in. Mom guilting me about abandoning them, Dad trying to bargain, my sister chiming in about how I was overreacting. Every one of them missed the point. This wasn't about the TV shows or the bills. This was about years of being pushed aside only to be pulled back in when they needed something. For the first time, I wasn't stepping back in, and something told me they weren't going to take that quietly. By the second morning after Thanksgiving, I knew they weren't done. The first wave of guilt and bargaining hadn't worked, so it was time for my mom to pull out her favorite tactic, sending in Emily. Emily has always been the golden child. She didn't earn it. She didn't have to. From the day she was born, Mom treated her like the sun the rest of us were supposed to orbit. If she forgot to pay a bill, there was an excuse ready. If she blew through money, there was sympathy and reassurance. And if I so much as hinted that things felt uneven, Mom would look at me like I was jealous, bitter, or both. So, when Emily's name popped up on my phone, I already knew this wasn't a social call. She started soft, asking if I was okay after leaving Thanksgiving. I could hear the fake concern in her voice, the kind where she's pretending to check on me, but is really just gathering information for Mom. I told her I was fine. That was all she needed to pivot into the real reason she called. According to her, Mom was really hurt about the way I left. Dad was under a ton of stress now that the mortgage payment was gone, and apparently my canceling the streaming services was punishing everyone over something small. That was the word she used, small. I let her talk because I knew there was more. There was. She said I was putting the whole family at risk by refusing to help, and that she hoped I realized how selfish that looked. She spoke like I was an outsider, some distant relative cutting ties out of spite, not the person who had been bailing them out for years. I reminded her slowly, so there was no misunderstanding, that those responsibilities had never been mine. I stepped in out of kindness. I stayed in because I didn't want to see them lose their home, but at no point was I obligated. She didn't like that answer. Her voice got sharper as she accused me of blowing up over a seating mix-up. That's what they were calling it now, a mix-up. I told her, it's not a mix-up when there's enough room for a stranger, but not for me. That's a choice, and it's one you remember. She went quiet for a moment, and then she delivered the line I knew she'd been sent to say. Mom had been crying all morning. She said it slowly, as if each word was supposed to land like a weight on my chest, and then she asked if I was happy now. It was exactly my mother's style, not an apology, not even a real conversation, just an emotional grenade tossed into my lap. I didn't take the bait. I told her I'd made my decision, and nothing about this conversation had changed that. Then I ended the call before she could try another angle. I sat there for a while after, letting the silence settle. I knew my mother well enough to understand this wasn't the end. If Emily couldn't guilt me into reversing my decision, Mom would try something bigger, louder, and harder to ignore. And when she did, it wouldn't just be aimed at me. It would be staged for an audience. It didn't take long for the next move. By Saturday morning, I got a group text from my aunt inviting everyone over for a casual afternoon get-together. Normally, I would have skipped it without a second thought, but something in my gut told me this wasn't just about coffee and catching up. If Mom wanted a stage, she was going to get one, and I was going to be in the front row to watch. When I walked in, I could feel it instantly. The energy shifted. Conversations dipped mid-sentence. I darted away. My cousin gave me a quick, awkward smile before turning back to his plate, and my uncle barely nodded. The air was thick with the kind of politeness that comes after people have been talking about you for a while. Mom was standing near the kitchen doorway, and the second she saw me, her face lit up with this big, fake warmth like we were best friends. She even hugged me. That's when I knew she wasn't here to patch things up. She was here to perform. It started slowly. She chatted loudly about how unexpected it was that I'd left Thanksgiving early, dropping in how she'd been worried sick all weekend. Then she eased into the real script, how difficult things had been financially lately, how certain support she'd been counting on had suddenly disappeared. She never said the words mortgage or Netflix, but she didn't have to. The looks around the room told me everyone knew exactly what she meant. She was painting the picture she wanted, her as the struggling, devoted mother abandoned by her cold, selfish daughter. I kept my face neutral and let her talk. I figured silence would rattle her more than anything. And then something happened I didn't see coming. My cousin, the same one whose girlfriend had taken my seat at Thanksgiving, spoke up. He didn't take my side exactly, but he did something almost unheard of in this family. He told Mom she was out of line. He said it wasn't right to talk about money like that in front of everyone, that it made things uncomfortable. The room froze. My aunt suddenly found something fascinating in her drink, and even Emily, who was sitting across from me, glanced up like she hadn't been expecting that either. Mom tried to laugh it off, making some comment about just sharing with family, but I could see her grip on the situation slipping. That's when I decided to take my turn. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't get dramatic. I just said clear enough for the whole room to hear, if we're going to discuss this in public, let's be clear. I'm not your safety net anymore. You made your choice at Thanksgiving. I made mine the next morning. That's it. You could have heard a pin drop. Mom's smile didn't break, but her eyes gave her away. She muttered something about checking the food and disappeared into the kitchen. I stayed another 15 minutes sipping coffee while pretending not to notice the sideways glances. I knew that the second I left, she'd be on the phone to Emily, rewriting the entire scene in her favor. What I didn't know yet was that her next move would make the Thanksgiving seating stunt look tame, because she was about to pull something so invasive and calculated that even I was stunned. 2 days later, I was buried in work when my phone started lighting up like something was on fire. 3 missed calls from Emily, 2 from Mom, 1 from my aunt. Then a text from a number I didn't recognize. Your mom's looking for you. You might want to check Facebook. I opened the app and my stomach dropped. Right there at the top of my feed was a long, dramatic post from Mom. She didn't use my name, but she didn't have to. Everyone in our family and most of our friends knew exactly who she was talking about. She'd written about how some people turn their backs on their family during hard times, how some daughters forget the sacrifices made for them, and how the holidays always reveal who truly cares. It was dripping with martyrdom, each line crafted to make her the victim and me the villain. Then I saw the photo. It was an old picture from years ago, me at a summer picnic, smiling with my arm around her. I looked like the perfect daughter in it. And now it was being used as a prop for her public pity parade. The comments section was already filling up. People I hadn't spoken to in years were chiming in with sympathy, calling her strong and inspiring. A few even offered her money. One woman I barely knew wrote that kids these days have no respect and that she hoped I came to my senses. My favorite was some guy volunteering to talk to me, as if I was some rebellious teenager instead of a grown woman who'd been paying her parents' bills for years. I sat there for a solid minute, my hands shaking, not from hurt, but from a kind of anger so clean it almost felt cold. She wasn't just trying to guilt me now, she was trying to publicly shame me into compliance. So I didn't send her a private message. I replied right there for everyone to see. I wrote that if she wanted to share the truth, she should post the part about how she gave my seat at Thanksgiving to a stranger, how I'd been covering her mortgage for years without a thank you, and how I decided I was done being treated like a walking bank account. I told her she could take my image out of her sob story, or I'd be happy to post receipts, literal ones, screenshots, payment records, messages. Then I hit send and closed the app. It took less than 5 minutes for the post to vanish. 10 minutes later, Emily was calling again. I let it ring out. The silence that followed wasn't the same as before. No rapid-fire texts, no guilt-tripping, no, we're worried about you, nothing. That's when I knew Mom wasn't dropping it. She was just regrouping. And I had the sinking feeling that the next move wouldn't come directly from her. It would be through someone else, someone she thought I couldn't ignore. The next move came a week later, and just like I suspected, it didn't come directly from Mom. It came from my dad. He showed up at my apartment without warning, knocking like it was an emergency. I considered not answering, but curiosity got the better of me. He was standing there holding a folder, not bills, not letters, but a printed list of expenses, groceries, utilities, house repairs. He said Mom was too upset to talk to me and that he'd come to work something out. The way he said it made it sound like this was some sort of negotiation, like I'd made an impulsive decision and just needed the right nudge to reverse it. I told him there was nothing to work out. I was done. He started in with the same lines I'd heard before. Family doesn't turn its back. We've always helped each other. You'll regret this someday. Only now there was a sharper edge. He said the house could be at risk without my help, and he made it clear that if that happened, people would know whose fault it was. That was the moment I knew there was no salvaging any of it. This wasn't about misunderstanding or hurt feelings. This was about control. I told him I wasn't interested in being part of their lives anymore. Not in a limited way, not with boundaries. Completely out. I said they could keep the younger golden daughter as their source of pride and the cousins plus one as their guest of honor every holiday. I was done being the quiet, dependable one in the background who kept the whole thing afloat. Then I handed him his list back, closed the door, and locked it. That night, I blocked them both. Numbers, email, social media, everything. I even called the bank to make sure they had no access to my accounts. In the days that followed, I got messages through mutual friends, some angry, some begging, some pretending nothing had happened at all. But none of them mattered anymore, because for the first time, my life didn't include them. And the silence was perfect. It's been a little over 6 weeks since I closed the door on all of it, literally and figuratively. No bills, no phone calls, no little, can you just help with this one thing request that always turned into something bigger. First, it was weird. The silence felt heavy, like I'd muted a sound I'd gotten so used to that I didn't notice it until it was gone. But after a few days, that silence started to feel clean, peaceful. I'd assumed that would be it. They'd be angry for a while, tell their version of the story to anyone who would listen, and eventually stop. And for a while it seemed like that's what was happening. Then last week happened. A mutual friend, someone who's always been neutral, sent me a message out of the blue. She said my parents had contacted her directly, asking questions about me. It wasn't small talk, it was very specific. Where I was working now, who I'd been spending time with, whether I was serious about anyone. It didn't feel like curiosity, it felt like reconnaissance. My first reaction was irritation, but underneath that was something colder, the realization that they're still trying to keep a thread tied to me. Not openly, not through direct contact, but quietly. It's like they can't stand the fact that I've stayed gone, so they're circling around hoping to find an opening. It made me wonder if they're looking for something to use against me, or if they're just desperate for a way back in without having to admit they were wrong. Either way, it only confirmed that I made the right decision. Aside from that, life has been calm. I've been able to focus on work without my phone buzzing with manufactured crises. I've spent time with friends who actually want me around, not because they need something from me, but because they like my company. I celebrated my own version of the holidays. No assigned seating, no strangers taking my spot, no pretending. So far, this is where it ends. I don't know if there will be another chapter. Maybe they'll eventually let it go. Maybe they're just regrouping for whatever their next move is. I've learned not to assume either way. If something new happens, I'll be back here to tell you exactly how it went down. For now, I just want to say thank you to everyone who's read, commented, and sent me messages over the last few weeks. Your support hasn't just made me feel less alone. It's made it easier to stay firm when part of me wanted to cave. And no matter what happens next, I know one thing for sure. There's no going back.